Although it was touted as cheaper childcare, the reality, Deputy Speaker, is that Labor has now spent an eye-watering $4.7 billion on this subsidy, but has not addressed the underlying issues which affect this sector. And that is, there has not been additional childcare places provided, particularly in the...
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hughes.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak in favour of this motion brought by the honourable member for Moncrieff. And while I'm there, I'd like to acknowledge the excellent work she's doing in her shadow portfolio of early education and youth. This motion deals with Labor's so-called cheaper childcare policy, which unfortunately has turned out to be anything but. Deputy Speaker, as we know, childcare is absolutely essential for women particularly to be able to return to the workforce after they have had children. It provides... The issue with childcare, Deputy Speaker, is not just about the cost that we pay for it. The issue is also about ensuring that parents, when they are returning to the workforce, that parents have access to quality childcare as well. Childcare is not just about childminding. Childcare is about educating our youngest members of our community and getting them ready for school. And it is absolutely essential that when we talk about childcare, we are not simply talking only about the cost. We must also be looking at the quality of the care that is being provided in these centres. Although it was touted as cheaper childcare, the reality, Deputy Speaker, is that Labor has now spent an eye-watering $4.7 billion on this subsidy, but has not addressed the underlying issues which affect this sector. And that is, there has not been additional childcare places provided, particularly in regional areas, nor has there been any attempt to attract and retain staff within this sector. And that is the underlying issue about why we are hearing about enormous wait lists. I know that the honourable member for Calpa recently spoke about it in his regional area. I'm in a metropolitan seat, Deputy Speaker, and in Hughes we have almost 7,000 childcare places. However, it costs on average $127 per day per child to put a child in the electorate of Hughes into daycare. That means for parents just putting one child into daycare, it's close to $30,000 per year after tax that must be found. And with the cost of living crisis that we are currently experiencing under this Labor government, that is prohibitive for many families. What we have seen, instead of cheaper childcare, we have seen out-of-pocket costs skyrocket, and early learning providers, I'm hearing across my electorate, are increasing their fees. They have to adjust to the ordinary costs involved in running a childcare centre. That is the additional cost now that they need to pay for the groceries that they provide for the children within their centre, just as an example. The last time, Deputy Speaker, that Labor was in government, childcare fees skyrocketed by 53% in just 6 years. And so far, in the last 9 months, it's been reported that they've increased across the board by 8% so far. So while those opposite may start talking about the subsidy and how they are making childcare cheaper for families, the reality is it is not becoming any cheaper for families. There's been no plan put forward by this government to address the increasing fees. There's been no plan to address access to childcare spaces, no plan to address the current workforce pressures faced by educators, and no plan to address particularly the childcare shortages in remote and regional communities. When introducing the childcare policy initially, the Albanese government said this policy would get thousands of women back into the workforce. However, this has not occurred, and it has not occurred because there's been no additional childcare places provided. The underlying issue of a lack of supply has not been addressed by the government's $4.7 billion in expenditure to date. So I support this motion brought by the member for Moncrieff, Deputy Speaker. Childcare is essential to enable women particularly returning to work, but the Labor government must do a lot better to address underlying issues in the childcare sector.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for